Hello and welcome to the first episode of Political Inquiry. We are a podcast put on by the Michigan Daily, which is an LGBTQ plus news publication at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor about queer issues as they pertain to local politics in Michigan. My name is Blake Bile. I'm a current senior studying political science and writing at the university, and today we are joined by current State House Representative Laurie Pohutsky of the 17th House District and current candidate for Michigan's new 19th House District. In this episode, we will be talking about Laurie's background, her journey into office, how she's dealt with homophobic opposition, and the November elections. Before we get started, I would just like to thank our sound producer Elena Mann, our script supervisor Jackie Moreno, and our social media / graphics director Atticus Spicer for their contributions on this episode. Without further ado, please enjoy.
Laurie, thank you so much for being here and joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I do want to start with a little introduction of yourself. Could you tell us a little bit about sort of your background, how you got into politics, and sort of your journey to office?
Yeah, of course. So I grew up in Redford, which is just outside of Detroit and also right next door to my current district. It is in the new 17th, though, so I'm glad that I can be running to represent my hometown.
You lucked out there, right?
I did. Redistricting treated me kindly. But I went, sorry, in advance. I went to MSU for college.
Yeah, it's okay.
And that's where I really got involved in activism, mainly through the Gay Straight Alliance. I got my degree in microbiology, was a microbiologist up until I was up until I took office, but in 2016, after Donald Trump got elected, frankly, I just got pissed off.
Mm-hmm.
I had still been involved in different activist groups, but it just felt like it wasn't enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I was also in a position where I was really fortunate. It takes a lot of time and energy and money to campaign, and I was very privileged to be in a place where I could do that.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't tell my employer that I was running for office until I won my primary, but they were really, really supportive.
That's
so
awesome.
Yeah, no, and a lot of people aren't. So I was really, really lucky in that regards. But the district that I was running to represent had been historically Republican held. Nobody really thought that we could flip it. The people there knew, but kind of the people who make decisions thought it was a long shot to say the least. Had a really competitive primary, won that by 9.5 points. The general was brutal, but we won it by 0.4%.
Hey,
so
a win's still a win, right?
Exactly. But so I ran, one, because I was horrified at the thought of what could potentially happen under the Trump administration, and ultimately did in a lot of cases happen under the Trump administration, and had just wanted to get more involved and looking at the things that I was concerned about, and also, frankly, the things that I knew my community was concerned about. Running for the state legislature was really the best place. And that is one thing that I tell people when they say that they're thinking about running for office. Take a minute to figure out where it is you want to run, because municipal government and local government is tremendously important. But if that's not where you think your expertise is going to be, or if you don't think that that's the type of policy you want to impact, then don't do that. Don't run for something just because you want a title next to your name. Go where you actually think you're going to make the most impact. So that's how that decision kind of came to be.
Okay. So for you, coming from that science background, what was kind of the few things in particular that really made you want to run and really made you think, I can contribute in this area?
Sure. Environmental legislation was one. There were a lot of rollbacks of environmental protections, prioritizing corporations over environmental integrity, as well as reproductive rights. That was something that we knew was going to get rolled back because there had been, at that point, a 45-year plan to do exactly that.
Mm-hmm.
So we saw the writing on the wall. Obviously not really wearing my scientist hat, but obviously LGBTQ protections.
Absolutely.
I don't think that very many of us believed Donald Trump when he said that wasn't something he was interested in interfering with.
Yep.
So, you know, I mean, there were, both because of my profession and also just because of my lived experience, there were a select number of things that I was very, very concerned with. You know, I mean, the immediate ban on immigrants being able to enter the country was horrifying. So, you know, it was a professional calculation, but also just me being terrified that, you know, I mean, my rights, but also the rights of people I cared about and people I loved were going to be trampled on, and ultimately were, and very, very quickly.
Yeah, I remember being in high school. I was a sophomore in 2016, and I had an English teacher who was also queer, one of my only allies at school. I went to school kind of in the base of the thumb, so very conservative, very, very white, very Protestant. And I remember her coming in the next day after he was elected and just kind of being inconsolable. And at that time, I didn't really know what the impacts of him being elected were going to be, because, you know, I don't really think anyone really knew. He's kind of, for lack of better words, just kind of like a shot off the wall. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you don't know what he's going to do. But my point is that, you know, even growing up and seeing these things happen, it affected my view towards politics, and obviously why I ended up getting into politics. When you were getting into politics, how did your sexuality influence kind of the way you went around or about campaigning, sort of advertising, quote unquote, advertising yourself? You know, how did that influence?
Yeah, I mean, I'd been out since I was 19 years old. So, you know, the people in my life already knew. But at the time, I was also married to a straight dude. So there was this weird balancing act of, you know, I'm not hiding anything, but also, I mean, bi erasure is real. And the fact that I was in what appeared to be a heteronormative relationship at the time kind of, I was worried about, frankly, catching hell from both sides of the issue. So it was never anything that I made an attempt to hide. But I was worried that I wasn't the right person to be talking about some of those issues. And frankly, I wish that I had done that differently, because I've heard since then how valuable it is for a lot of LGBTQ kids, bisexual and otherwise, to see someone running and to see someone not trying to hide their sexuality or anything like that. So, you know, I mean, there were photos. I mean, I had posted photos of myself at Pride. And I didn't think anything of it because I wasn't living my life any differently than I had been, you know, certainly since I came out, but really even before then. And I was a little surprised when there was a mailer that came out with a photo of me at Pride that, again, I myself had posted. So I don't really know what they thought they were getting with that.
It's a gotcha moment, right?
Right, exactly. Thank you for taking this photo that I specifically picked because I thought I looked good in it and posted. But they sent it out, you know, attacking me on not living up to the district's family values and things. So really like dog whistly things. My second campaign was much more, the gloves were a little bit off. They specifically got a candidate who is against marriage equality, and they, you know, tried to go that route. And obviously now I think we all recognize that the attacks against our community have ratcheted up. So it's gotten progressively more and more hostile. But my first campaign, I think they frankly didn't really know what to do because they were having a hard time. Like, well, wait a minute. It's that classic, like, people who are uncomfortable with the community, I think, not understanding, like, my sexuality is not the thing that I wake up thinking about constantly. So, like, sure, you're going to find things out there about me being queer, but it's not like you found a picture that I posted where I went with my family, you know? So I think they weren't quite sure how to do it. And then, you know, we've seen kind of this national strategy take shape since then. So they've certainly gotten much more coordinated and frankly, just much more gross about it. but I just looked at it as like I was living my life.
Yeah.
No different than I had been.
Right.
So
but you said, I'm interested, you said that you were fearful of getting attacks on both sides.
Yeah.
So did you, we kind of heard about a little bit of the attack of kind of like the queer side. Have you received attacks about
not
your
some.
bisexuality or about like your sort of your marriage or?
I mean, so this is not a weird thing. We're totally great friends, but I'm not married anymore. Which was then like a whole weird thing too, because I think people assumed like, oh, it's because she's not straight. And I'm like, no, we get divorced too, just for normal reasons.
Yeah.
Like it's not, whatever.
It's not the bottom line.
Right,
again.
exactly.
Yeah.
But attacks are maybe a strong word, but there are certainly people who have said it's actually been more straight Democrats than, I mean, our
That's
community.
interesting.
Yes.
That's very interesting.
Who are like, well, but like, you don't really count, right? Because you do date guys. And I'm like, okay,
yeah,
I'm not having this debate with you.
Yeah.
Like, but fine. I think our community, I mean, when I first came out, there was certainly a lot more tension with the community and, with my friends and my chosen family, even because, if I was dating someone of the same gender, great. If I wasn't, like, oh, you're, taking a tour through here or something.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, trust me, it's not convenient. You guys know this. So like the attacks haven't really, there's been snide comments here and there, but for the most part, it's really been more straight Democrats who are allies, but maybe don't understand as much about our community as we do, obviously.
Yeah.
So I think that, I had based that fearfulness on previous interactions I'd had with the community, but it's also been interesting because my niece is gay and she came out, oh gosh, probably about 5 years ago now. And she's talked about, she's Gen Z, and I am so grateful for Gen Z because like I talked to her about all this and I'm like, but like maybe I shouldn't be the one introducing this bill because I'm not a lesbian, I'm bi. And she was like, do you know how ridiculous you sound? Like none of my friends care about any of that because you guys are way more hung up on labels than we are. And we just want the bill introduced. We don't really care who you're dating or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I think that my fearfulness was based in a moment in time when I came out and there were very big opinions. And it's not that there still aren't, it's just that like our community is growing and the newest and most vocal members of it who advocate the strongest for our causes do not give a damn which letter of the alphabet you fall under anymore. And I think that that's been a real a wake-up call for me because I think I was worried about things that frankly I didn't need to be worried about anymore.
Yeah, like the divisiveness within the community needs to stop.
For real.
And I think, I don't even think it originates, wherever it originates, whether it's from inside the community or outside the community, it just needs to stop. You know what I mean? There needs to be no more gatekeeping.
Yeah.
We are all queer. We are all, you know what I mean? We're all a part of the same family. So I totally agree with you, and that gives me hope that, that Gen Z is pushing the way. My mom is an elementary principal in Warren Consolidated Schools.
Oh wow.
And we'll get onto this, but she's really good friends with the Media Center, who has introduced multiple picture books about queer representation and queer education. But she's even told me how much she's seen it change since I got out of high school. And I got out of high school maybe 4 years ago. So she's just seen an increase in acceptance by families, an increase in kind of like you said, like there are more of us now. People are feeling more comfortable, even despite the obstacles and the resistance. But I guess that brings us to our next point, is about kind of the resistance that the Republican opposition has towards queer education in schools. And I don't know about you, but when I went to high school, there was no queer education. When I went to public school, period, there was no queer education. You know, and that may have well changed since I've been out, but to me, it just seems like I don't understand. I don't understand the battle there.
Yeah.
Can you give a little bit more insight on what you think is going on?
So it's shifted over the course of me being elected, right? I think that when I had first come into office, we were at this point where I think even opponents of our community, which like I'm gonna say things like that, and I just want to say now that feels like such a weird thing to say. Like opponents of our right to exist
Right.
is a bonkers thing to even say, but like I that's the best way for me to describe it right now, I guess.
I mean, it is kind of the reality of it,
right.
though, right? I mean, it's people are resistant to our being.
Yes. So even folks that were that far on that side of the issue, I think had kind of realized like, oh, we've lost this. Like, it turns out people are not afraid of, you know, the LGBTQ community, or, you know, turns out they do have rights. I'm like, oh, okay, fine. And it shifted a little bit. And now I don't know if it's because of, you know, the conspiracy theories that we've seen. You know, I mean, I don't know if you remember this whole Pizzagate thing. Like, I remember watching that play out in real time and thinking, this is going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
And I think it has, because now there are people that are convinced that, you know, there are, you know, secret cults, and they're all, I don't even really know how to explain it, but it has turned into this like throwback version of homophobia from, you know, like the 60s and 70s and even previous, but we haven't seen it in a while, to where, you know, this groomer narrative and this pedophile narrative. No one's trying to teach your kids about specific types of sex or anything. That's not it. Like, do I think that we need medically accurate and scientifically accurate sex ed in school? Yes.
Of course, yeah.
But that's not about pushing an agenda. That's just making sure that kids, you know what is going to happen with their bodies and, you know, basic biology. It has nothing to do with sexual orientation or sexual identity, but there's been a complete unwillingness to understand that and kind of see the difference, but also understand that a lot of kids feel more comfortable being who they are at school. And that's not even an indictment of parents or anything. It's just you're around your peers. You're around people who are not, I mean, teachers are, but, you know, your classmates aren't authority figures. So some of that is organically going to happen there. And I think that there's this push to try and assign that, you know, some type of, it is coming from some type of outward force. You know, no one is recruiting children to the community. Like, that's not, I think we're seeing greater numbers of people being out and feeling comfortable be themselves because of the progress that we have made, that we are trying desperately to cling to right now. So I think that there was absolutely a time where we were going to start talking about important historical figures who contributed to the civil rights movement for LGBTQ people, but also just the fact that there are important figures in our history who happen to be queer. And we have gotten to the point now where there are people who don't even want those people discussed because of their personal lives. And, you know, as we talked about, it's not even necessarily that being queer was central to the story of their lives or their contributions. I don't think that we need to erase that part, but that's not even the point. And I think that there is just this attempt to completely erase the contributions of our community to history and to our own movement. And I think that, you know, the reasoning they're giving now has to do with this groomer narrative, which is disgusting and dangerous. But I think it's just a throwback to how it was handled before. You know, the last time that we had to fight for our own civil rights. I don't think anyone is actually, well, I shouldn't say that because there are a lot of people who have bought into these conspiracy theories, or people who are just unfortunately very bigoted who do think that we are a danger just because of who we are. But I don't think that that's what the people who are orchestrating this actually think. I think they recognize that it worked before and they were able to stifle our rights and our progress as a community. And they're just kind of going back to what worked before.
I mean, as queer people, we hear that narrative all the time, the groomer narrative, the pedophile narrative. And, I need to look more into it, but Senator McMurrow was attacked, I think last year, with kind of similar rhetoric. Have you ever received anything from colleagues in the House or constituents or whoever? Have you ever received some of that rhetoric?
Absolutely. I mean, if you, you pull up my Twitter right now, actually, it's going on because I gave a speech on the floor the other night that people are up in arms about.
The one that you posted, people are, well, that makes sense that people are up in arms
exactly
about it,
exactly. But yeah, and in fact, this is not to malign Senator McMurrow, because I am grateful that she spoke up, and I am grateful that she got this message out, and that she is using the platform that resulted from that to help the cause, truly. But what was a little kind of like a light bulb moment is what was said about her had been being said about, myself and Senator Moss, who is the first openly gay state senator in Michigan. And we had been flagging it. And, people would see it. Like you said, you can't, if you look at our social media, you see it. But unfortunately, the best messenger for people to realize what a threat that is and how unacceptable that behavior is came from a cishet suburban mom, which, again, like, I am grateful that we have a messenger for it, and that, she was able to stand up and say that this is unacceptable. But it was kind of a wake-up call to realize that, oh, but wait, the actual queer people who have been dealing with these attacks for quite some time have been saying it.
And you're not being heard.
Exactly. And we aren't being heard. So, okay, at least the message is out, and at least people are realizing, oh, this is gross, this is dangerous, this is unacceptable, fine. But no, I mean, we've definitely, I've had virtual coffee hours sidetracked because people wanted to talk about, me being a groomer or a pedophile, or just, I'm not voting for you because you're a lesbian. And I'm like, well, okay,
yeah,
fine,
first of all,
we're not even going to go into that, buddy. But like, okay, I don't think correcting you is going to change your mind, so that's fine. But no, we've gotten it a lot, and I imagine that. I know, because so John Hoadley was an openly gay representative in my first term, and when he ran for Congress against Fred Upton, that was their attack against him, that he was a pedophile, and like they found like old live journal things and took it all out of context and stuff like that, and did really heinous, truly homophobic things that are now commonplace. When we first saw that, I was horrified and I was shocked, because like I knew that people were still homophobic. I knew they said things about the out members, but to just see it mailed to the entire congressional district, accusing him of these things that were not true and were disgusting and defamatory.
That's what I was about to say. Is that not defamation? Like, could he not? It's hard.
There's a separate standard for political candidates and political figures.
Okay. So the media can't do it, but if it's your opponent.
Right. No, exactly. I mean, I've had some of the attack mail that's been sent out about me has been like, this is factually inaccurate. Like, even things as simple as my voting record. Like, that's public information. I can literally pull it up, and there's not much that can even be done about it, because they will find some way to spin it for why it's okay or why it's appropriate, or like the cost associated with it. Like, it's just it's frustrating, and in some ways it's deeply unsettling that we're living in a world now where someone can accuse a political opponent of truly one of the worst crimes out there is like pedophilia, and there's not much you can do about it.
Yep.
So yeah.
So, I mean, how does that, and I expect that you've heard sort of similar rhetoric from colleagues. How does that influence your stance on bipartisanship? Because that's got to be hard when people are invalidating your being, and then you want to do what's right for your constituents, you want to do what's right for your districts, you are the representative, you want to vote, you know what I mean? Like, how does that influence you?
It's hard. There are some people who, and for the record, I don't know which one of these is more frustrating / hurtful, and it might depend on the day. There are members on the Republican side of the aisle that I work really, really well with. I have friendly interactions, with, text asking about their family and stuff like that, that will consistently vote against my rights. And I don't think they even mean it. I think they are going along to get along. And there has to be like a bifurcation there with me, right? Like, these are people that I don't think are actually bad people. They take bad votes, and I don't think that actually makes it any better, but it's just how I kind of have to compartmentalize it.
Yeah.
That being said, there are other members who are just true believers and don't think that I should have rights, and will, get on Twitter and talk about how the whole community is, full of pedophiles and looking to maim children and things like that. And I just, at least right now, like the couple that I'm thinking of are kind of objectionable people anyway. They're not people who would really want to work with me, and vice versa. And I have to be able to live with myself for the rest of my life. So I just choose to not associate with those people. There are compromises that I can make if I, for the job that I'm doing, and for the important work that needs to get done and has to be done in a bipartisan manner. There are things that I can choose to look away from when I need to, but there are also some people that just, their behavior is so beyond the pale that that's not possible.
Yeah. I mean, do you think straight members of the House and of the Michigan legislature think about these things too? They have to navigate their vote based on how other members, how other colleagues, like, almost invalidate that. Like,
right.
That's something I don't think.
Right. I don't know. And I'm trying to think, like, I would imagine that there are some comparable issues for some members, right? We have, in the Democratic caucus, we have a like historically diverse caucus. I think this term we had the highest number of elected people of color that we've ever had, I believe, was this term. So I know for a fact, when we have people over on the other side of the aisle railing against CRT and railing against accurate history, they know that they have a similar fight that I do. And in fact, not this last session, we had like an all-night session at the end of June. And we knew it was going to be an all-day thing, so we went at ease, and I went outside and I realized that there was Tudor Dixon's press conference, like her first one about I think it was drag queens and pedophiles in schools, and it was like the first anti-LGBTQ press conference she had. And I look over, and a bunch of my colleagues that I am going to be spending the rest of the day on the floor with are standing there supporting her. And it kind of it flustered me, and I went and did what I had to do, came back, and then later that night at 2 a.m, probably, we were there really late. I had tried to introduce an amendment to tie bar the expansion of the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act to a bill that we were voting on. And we knew it wasn't going to pass, but I was going to speak to it. And I had said that this is important to me as a bisexual woman, and they gabbled me down because I said that I was bisexual. And I was like, oh, weird choice, but okay. And like I've watched the video since because I got very upset and it was embarrassing. So like I went back to watch it and see if it was like as bad as I thought it was.
Yeah.
And I got kind of flustered and confused because I was like, wait, I can't say that today. Okay. And I was like, okay, well, you know, this is important because we've seen increased violence against the community. 2 days ago, there was a pride flag that was set on fire in the middle of Michigan Avenue, straight down the street from the Capitol. And they gabbled me and they cut off my microphone and wouldn't let me talk anymore. And I think like all of the tension and anger and sadness, frankly, from like having to deal with this all day and walking past that god awful press conference with some people that frankly surprised me that they were even out there participating, bubbled up in me. And I went and sat down in my chair and I just started sobbing. And my seatmate, Stephanie Young, who is a pastor and one of the truly like kindest people I know, is a Black woman. And she looked at me and she was like, she had tears in her eyes and she went, "You okay?" And I was like, "I'm so embarrassed, but I'm so tired of this. Like, these people are awful." And I had to walk past that awful press conference. And she went, "It's okay to know when you've hit your wall." You know, I was trying to do this book club and it was right after George Floyd was murdered. And there were these people who just were not understanding why I was upset and why I was sad and why I was mourning. And I hit my wall. And I want you to know that even if it is happening on this floor in this public setting, it is okay to hit your wall. So I know that all of that is to say, I know there are other members because their communities have also faced oppression and are facing oppression currently. I know that there are some that understand that, but I also know that there are others that simply do not. And that this is just a vote going up on the board.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's a partisan thing. It's going to be on an attack mailer and we need to deal with that, not deal with not examine, I guess, the practical implications for people, including some of those who you work with. You know, it's just, some of them I think understand it. Others I don't think do.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen with all this polarization that can't help. You know what I mean? Like that, I think we're seeing right now a failure in government because of polarization. And, you know, if my personal thing is, it's not the Democrats' fault. Democrats are willing to corroborate, but Republicans just won't back down on some of these fundamental issues. And that brings me to my next point, which I'm sure you've heard of before, but Senator Moss introduced a bill to reaffirm the state's recognition of June as Pride Month. And to my knowledge right now, it has not been passed.
So this year, no. In the Senate, it didn't pass. In the House, we actually got a Pride Week.
Okay.
And that was a whole process.
Damn, yeah.
But the year before, both Senator Moss, over in the Senate and in the House, we got a Pride Month resolution, which was a whole other background story as well. Because I had actually introduced it. And I was told that they would pass it, but not if my name was on it. So someone else introduced it, but it passed. And that was truly one of those things, because that was the first time we had gotten it done. And to be clear, we would not have gotten it through the House if Senator Moss hadn't gotten it through the Senate. So like, he gets all of the credit for negotiating that and sticking with it. And in fact, I think he deserves even more credit, because the reason it did not happen in the Senate this time is because they wanted to put in really heinous language that completely invalidated the entire thing. And he stuck by it and said, that's insulting and we're not doing it. I would rather not do it at all and tell everybody why we don't have it than to let that go in.
Concede that, yeah.
Exactly.
I actually have that quote right here, the revisions that he wanted to make. I think it was the Senate Majority Leader. He writes, though not every citizen in Michigan agrees with the lifestyle of the LGBT community, it is agreed that every life is special, precious, unique, and loved by the Creator. Each person is created in God's image. I read that you have gone to Catholic school.
Yeah.
How how does that make you feel? I don't know your relationship with spirituality, but how does that make you feel? How does that sort of statement with that kind of rhetoric, the religious rhetoric, how does that make you feel?
I mean, it's tough, right? Because like you
Mhm.
said, I went to Catholic school for 12 years. I spent all of that time not having come out yet, but knowing, right? Because
Mhm.
we all know.
Yeah. Yep.
And being told that who I was wrong.
Mhm.
And, not only was it wrong, it was a sin. It was, I had, I think, one teacher who I do not know how she stayed employed at that Catholic school, but would talk to us about actual like social justice issues. And like, she was the first person that talked to us about systemic racism and homophobia and things like that. And it was wonderful to hear that. But I also knew you were the outlier.
Mhm.
And this is still something that this organization thinks is wrong and thinks is, like a mortal sin. Like I'm going to go to hell for how I feel and who I love. So it's just, it was a slap in the face.
Mhm.
And understanding, that I am by far the only queer person who has that experience and has dealt with that type of religious trauma before. Again, I give Jeremy all the credit in the world for not just taking the easy route and saying, well, sure, we can have it, I guess. Maybe no one will understand it. Like understanding it is better to have nothing at all than something that is going to undercut who we are and what we have fought for. And I was so enraged for it when he called and told me that this is what they wanted to put in there. I was so enraged for him because I mean, I obviously felt like a very personal way about it, but I wasn't the one having to sit there and be told by Mike Shirky, like, this is a fine compromise. What do you mean? What's wrong with it? I think he actually told Jeremy, like, I worked very hard on this. And Jeremy went, I believe that you did.
Yeah.
It's wasted work. It's unacceptable. So, oh
And
well.
Mike Shirley was the same person who passed it last year, right? Or who he was Republican majority last year.
Yeah.
Do you think because it's the election year, that's why things have changed, or what? Like, what has changed?
Well, that was Jeremy's thing. We both introduced the exact same resolution that had passed the year before. So yeah, I think it being an election year, I think the hostile and hateful and dangerous rhetoric around the LGBTQ community was something that emboldened Mike Shirky to do this. I think all of that is probably a contributing factor for why he decided to just let it roll this year with this nonsense trying to be put in there. It is.
If we expect we expect a few things from our politicians: transparency and consistency. And I'm sure his constituents don't care that he was inconsistent in that way. When he first passed it, did he come under any fire from the Republican side, or
not really?
Okay.
I mean, not that I recall. I think he even had a Republican co-sponsor or two maybe on it. No, not really. And in fact, I think that the House Republicans, if anything, were more irritated because they were planning on just ignoring my resolution. And then Jeremy introduced it and it got passed, which meant that the Senate Republicans had agreed to pass it, but had not communicated to the House about it. And they were like, well, now we look like extra bigots if we don't do it. So that was how the conversation took place, that we'll pass it, but it can't have your name on it. So Tim Sneller, who is also an out member in the House, put his name on it and introduced it, and we got it done. But yeah, I don't understand. I'm with you. It didn't seem like it was a big controversial thing last year. And I don't understand why Mike Shirky had to go and try to have it his way this time. I don't.
I don't understand it, but like you said, House Republicans, before they knew that the Senate had passed it, they were just going to ignore you. And that's because of the makeup of the legislature right now. The Senate and the House are both Republican majority.
They are narrowly, but they are.
And this year, we have the luxury of new districts.
Yes.
Redistricted by the Independent Citizens Commission. How are you feeling about the midterm elections? Do you think that, because I hear all the buzz, Democrats are going to flip it, and fingers crossed, I'm out canvassing, we're about to do this. How do you feel about the midterm elections, and what do you think are some of the biggest things that people can do to contribute?
Sure. I feel really well, actually. Today I was out knocking for Reggie Miller.
Okay.
And we are having positive conversations with people in areas where we historically have never had a shot. And I think that between redistricting and, with things like Prop 2 and 3, bringing people out to the polls, I think that we are going to, I think we have our best shot that we've had in a very, very long time. But that being said, I don't want us to get complacent, because I think in 2018, and we did really, really well in 2018, we flipped a lot of seats. But in 2018, we thought that it being the first midterm election post Donald Trump's election, we were going to take everything over, and we did really, really well, but we didn't quite get there. 2020, I think that we thought because Donald Trump was on the ballot again, there'd be this huge blue wave, and there was, but there was an equally powerful red wave. And, in the House, we broke even. So yeah, I think that we always think that there's going to be this extra factor that is going to save us. And I think that this is probably our best shot, but that doesn't mean we can get complacent or let our foot off the pedal. So I know you and I, before we started recording, we're talking about canvassing. Honestly, if it is something you feel comfortable doing, I think that is the most powerful thing that we can be doing right now. Both of my general elections, I won by less than 250 votes, which means every single conversation that I or a volunteer had on doors made an impact. I promise it is not as scary as it sometimes sounds. It's actually kind of interesting, because you get to talk to people about things that you don't get to talk to people about a lot. And it's like, it's measurable progress. So canvassing, finding other ways that you can donate your time. If folks have money, that's cool. But, I know that, not a lot of us have a lot of disposable income. So your time is just as valuable, if not more valuable. So, phone banking, canvassing, some folks do postcards. That's really helpful sometimes too. Like getting a handwritten postcard versus a pre-printed mailer can make a lot of difference to some people. So just reaching out to campaigns near you that might need help is really, really helpful.
What are, I remember hearing that there are 4 kind of battleground districts. Could you kind of just like deny or confirm what those districts are, and maybe where people should be kind of centering some of that attention towards?
Sure. So in the Senate, we have, offhand, I'm thinking of 3 like battleground districts. There's a Grand Rapids seat out in Kent County, where David LeGrand is running. There's a St. Clair County or Shores district where Kevin Hertel is running. And then Padma Kupa is running out in the like Troy, Clawson, Oakland County area. In the House, we have a handful of them. Like there's 110 House members, so we have a lot more. It's kind of like a choose your own adventure. We can pick our path to majority, sort of. So Matt Colzar in Plymouth, his areas, Plymouth, Livonia, Northville. Yeah, I think those are all that's in his district. That's a really pivotal seat. Alex Garza downriver, so the Taylor and other surrounding downriver communities area. Reggie Miller in Belleville is a really great candidate. Jennifer Conlon out in Brighton is really great. Angela Whitwer in Delta County and like the surrounding communities is a tough seat. Nate Shannon out in Macomb County. So there's a lot more in the House. John Fitzgerald, Joey Andrews over on the west side of the state. Betsy Kofia up in Traverse City is doing an amazing job and just giving Jack O'Malley a run for his money right now. So there's a lot of different places where you can invest your time if you have it available, and we would be very appreciative of it.
Yeah, well, tomorrow's the beginning of GOTV, right?
I mean, basically, yeah, because absentee ballots have really shifted that whole thing. Post 2018, being able to do no reason absentee is a fantastic thing, and I'm so grateful we did it. But yeah, it means that GOTV really starts as soon as those ballots go out versus, you know, like the week leading up to the actual election. It's really drawn it out. So yeah.
Well, you know, I want to thank you for coming on the show with us, and talking with me about your experiences, and how people can better contribute to the midterm elections this November. You know, as always, we love you. We support you.
You guys are amazing.
You are awesome. You know, the little side thing, my roommate and I talk about you all the fucking time. Like we absolutely love you. My roommate will be like, "Oh, how's Laurie doing?" Because she knows that I'm into you.
Oh.
And or they know I'm into you, and be like, "Oh my god, like last night I saw you posted that speech." I was like, "You gotta watch this. You gotta watch this. Like, isn't this so good?" So keep on keeping on.
I appreciate
we
it.
appreciate you. Best of luck in the November election.
Thank you. Thank you.
And you can get it done.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for everything you're doing.
Well, that wraps up our first episode of Political Inquiry. Tune in next week for our interview with Michigan's first openly gay state senator, Jeremy Moss, about the resurging attacks on queer folk within the Michigan legislature. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to share us on your social medias and with your friends and family. You can find us on Twitter and on Instagram at InquiryPod. Thank you for listening.